All right, guys, so we are going to look at doing our stones and how we're going to use value to fill in the facets. Remember, facets are the sides or these flat faces of the stone. So what you need to do is you need to choose what color stone you want to create. So if you want pink or purple or green, and then grab that color. And if you can, I would also grab another color that may be slightly lighter or darker to it similar. So like for my first one here, I'm gonna do a pink stone, but I'm also gonna grab kind of a purple to go along with it to help me create some of those darks. So like if you were doing green, you might want a light green and a dark green with you. But if you don't have two shades, you can do this with just one color. And I'm going to show you how to do it with two colors on the first one and then just one color on the second one if you need to. So I have my paper here. I have two stones. You guys might have two. You might only have one. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. So where I'm going to start first is I'm going to start with my center facet here, and then I'll move around to my outside ones. So what I want to do is I'm going to pick where the light is coming from. So for me, I'm going to have the light like it's shining down on top right here. So on my first facet, I'm actually going to have a shadow here, and then it's going to fade lighter as it goes down the side of the facet. So what I want to actually do is I'm not going to start with my darkest color. I'm going to start with my medium color first. So I'm going to go in with my pink, and I'm going to kind of start coloring in. Now I don't want it to be too dark. I don't want to go too hard with this yet, but I'm going to go through and kind of start coloring this in. And I'm trying to keep it nice and neat and kind of all lined up in one direction, kind of using the sides of the stone to choose which direction I'm coloring. So when I'm doing this side, I'm coloring in this direction. And I'm just going to kind of go through, and in the top section of my stone here, I'm going to color in. And if you're doing, you know, a square emerald or a rectangle stone, either way, you're going to pick kind of your biggest, most center facet, and that's where you're going to start. So I'm going to kind of work my way, just creating a medium tone here. And then as I start to get down to this bottom corner, I'm going to start lightening it up. So I'm going to kind of go around the side here with my pink, but then that's going to be kind of the darkest it gets there. So kind of lightly going around the edge of my stone there with my pink. And then, as I said, from here, I'm just kind of getting it lighter and lighter as it's going down. And guys, you can do this with colored pencil, with crayon. If you really want to get risky and you have paint that you're allowed to use, you could definitely try it with that. So I kind of have it fading to this lighter right here, and I can always add more later. Now I'm actually going to switch and go to my darker color. Now if you only have one color, you might want to take that one and really go in and try and create the darkest dark you can get with that color, and that's great. I'm actually going to go in with kind of my dark reddish burgundy color and kind of create a shadow here right along this edge. Remember I said this light was shining here, so this is actually going to be my lightest piece, and then the light kind of creates a shadow here, and then it fades and gets lighter and lighter as I go down my piece here. So kind of going through, filling this in, darkening it up. This is kind of like when we created our value scale that I showed you with the black. This is another way you can also do it, is getting a similar color, but in a darker shade to kind of help darken it up some. So now I've kind of gone through and created my darkest shadow, and now I'm going to go back in with my pink again and kind of help create more of a medium. So I'm going to go back in and kind of blend this together. So going kind of back over the top of it and just kind of working out more, little more color here. So darkening up some of these edges. And then I'll just kind of have it fade here almost to nothing. And I'm kind of going over this spot down here that is pretty much white, where I'm leaving it and just leaving a really, really light shade of pink down here. And then I can kind of go back in, make sure it blends so it doesn't look like stripes coming down, but it's kind of faded. And I can always go back in if I'm like, oh, it looks like it needs to be a little darker here or a little, you know, less. But it's always easier, guys, to make things darker than to make things lighter. Once they're dark, it's a lot harder to take away that dark color than it is to darken up a color that's a little too light. So I would just be really careful of that. Don't press too hard to start with. Don't go too dark to start with, because it's a lot harder to take off the dark than to add it in later. So kind of go in there. I'm going to add a little more medium. And then once I kind of have my center stone where it fades kind of dark to light, ooh, got a lot of focus there. Then I'm going to start working my way around the sides. So this one I said is going to be my lightest. So I'm starting with my pink, and I'm not going to have any of that darker color on here. And I'm going to have kind of some pink all around the edges here, kind of thickening it up in the corners where it's touching another facet. I'm going to kind of do the same over here, where it's definitely darker, kind of here in the corners. And then it kind of fades lighter as it gets out towards the middle of the facet. Once again, always can go darker, so much harder to lighten it up, guys. So I want to start decently light, and then I can always go back in and kind of add just on the corners there a little bit. Remember, this is going to be my lightest facet up here because this is where my light source is coming from. So I'm kind of starting a lot lighter here. And then I'm going to kind of move to my next facet. So this one here, I'm going to kind of like this one, have dark on this top edge, and then it's going to fade to lighter here. So I'm going to start really nice and dark. And then I'm going to fade it out. So this is that value where I'm putting more or less pressure on my crayon colored pencil to make darker and lighter. And then if we really want to darken up, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that darker colored shadow right down there at the end. So kind of working its way around there. And then I'm going to keep moving on to this next one. Now, as it gets farther away, this lightest stone, so as if my light is right here shining on this stone, I'm really trying to create volume and stone. So as it gets farther away from my light source, it's going to get darker. So this one's the lightest, and then they're going to little darker, darkest is always going to be opposite or across from where that light source is located over here. So now I'm going to kind of come in, starting with my pink. Kind of across the side here, since these ones go up and down. And then it's going to fade to my lighter as it gets close to that side. So kind of blending it out. Try not to make it look too stripy. And then I'm going to go in with that darker shade again, or with more pressure. And I'm going to go right along that edge. As it goes dark, I'm going to add a little more medium in there. Fade it into light. And I'm going to keep moving it around. Keep going and going. So now I'm going to switch to this one. This one, kind of like this one here. I'm going to have some dark shadow right on the edges. I'm just going to start with my pink. Because the light source, remember, is over here. So this one's going to be a little bit darker than this one across from it. Or this one's going to be a little bit lighter than this one over here, because this one's further away from that light source. So I'm going to have a little more white kind of still showing through in this one. And then I'm going to go back in here and still kind of darken up that corner. As it's kind of coming around there. And as I'm looking, I'm actually going to go back in and darken this one up a little more as well. Especially down here towards the bottom. I'm going to have this side here a little darker, because this top corner is still kind of close to the light. That bottom corner is definitely further away. And then coming down to what are going to be my two darkest pieces. So since these are going to be my darkest, I'm going to actually start with my darker color. And I am going to go in with this darker, kind of bringing it down across. But even with this darker, I'm going to start darker with it, or darkest, I should say, along the edge here. And even it's going to kind of lighten up. And then I'm going to blend my pink in with it now. To make sure I'm getting the same color in this section. And then as it fades down here to the bottom, it's really just going to be that pink color. I'm not going to have any of that darker shade on it. And then I can kind of go back in and just lightly darken up what I need to. And then once again, darkest. All right, guys, I have no idea what happened. My video all of a sudden just cut out, but all I did was finish this last one. And this last one, because it's opposite the light source. So whichever the lightest one is, on the opposite side of your crystal, that's where you're going to find the darkest one. So that's all I did there, was I added the darkest section, and I kind of almost colored it in solid one dark color. So now I'm going to show you guys what you're going to do if you're just using one. So on this one, I use two shades. I use the light and dark of kind of the same color. And now on this one, I'm just going to use one shade. So I'm going to make this one green. And what I'm going to do from this one, since it doesn't have a center facet here, like this one does here, where there's one kind of right in the middle and then a bunch around it, since this one doesn't have a center facet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick where my light source is coming from. So I'm going to do it kind of the same, like it's coming from over here. And the same thing's going to happen. The one closest to it is going to be the lightest. The one farthest from it is going to be the darkest. And they're just going to kind of fade through that. So I'm going to go in with green for this one. And I'm going to kind of start with my corners and right around the edge, being kind of a medium green. I'm definitely not pushing my hardest, but I could definitely also make it a little lighter, which I'm going to here. In the middle, I'm just going to kind of fade it to a very light green here in the middle. So keeping it pretty light. I'm going to zoom in on this one as I'm going through. And then if I need to, I'm going to kind of just darken up the corners a little bit. Nothing too strong. So this is where if you were doing two colors, you might want to take the darker color now and really darken up the edge. But this is where my light coming from. So this piece is going to stay pretty light. Then I'm going to move on to my piece next to it. And this one's going to get just a little darker. So once again, right on the edge where the two sides of the stone meet, it's going to be darkest and it'll fade to kind of lighter right in the middle there. So a shadow is going to kind of cast as the light makes it around that corner of the stone or that edge of it. So I'm kind of darkening it up there. And then I'm fading it in to the middle part of this facet here. So it's going to kind of fade in lighter and lighter as it reaches this outside corner, because the light would kind of shine, it would hit this edge and then it would bounce off and come over to this corner. So that's why this side of it's going to be a little lighter. All right, so it kind of shines from there to there, and now this side, since it's two sections away, is going to be darker even still from these last two. So kind of the tip is going to be nice and dark there. And now I'm really going through and kind of not quite, I would say, the darkest I can get this green, but I'm making it pretty dark, darker than I have yet so far, right around the edge of my facet. And then I'm going to kind of fade it lighter still as it gets to the middle, because even though it's darker, it's still not my darkest. So then I'm going to kind of go back in and make sure I'm blending in my middle parts there. So get my medium green, my darkest green, and then kind of fade to a light in the middle. So that's kind of where it's going around here. Now I'm going to come over here and work my way across these as well. So if I come down to this part here, I'm going to go in and just like this kind of had all this color and then it got really dark here. I'm going to go really pretty dark in this first corner here. And you guys, really, as long as kind of in all of yours, you have a good fade where it goes from light to dark in most of your facets, you should be all right. This may mean if you chose a stone that has a lot of facets to it, that you have a lot of coloring to do. I'm going to kind of bring it down over here. And then we're going to do my medium, and then I'll kind of blend it out in the middle. So I'm not having too much where it's kind of a light space. So I'm going to kind of bring it down dark to the edge there. And then kind of keep going. And guys, the darker color you start with, the stronger this is going to be. So like if I started, because it's kind of a light green, if I wanted mine and it was like a really dark blue, then it's going to have a little more contrast, meaning some really dark darks and some really light lights. Since I'm kind of using a lighter green, I'm not going to have as dark of color as I did like over here with kind of my pinky purple one. So just kind of be aware of that, especially if you're using just one single color like I am here. Instead of using two shades like I did here, you're not going to see as much of like the dark darks and the light lights. It's going to be a little more minimal. We don't have as much, like I said, contrast. So that kind of comes on there, and I'm going to keep my way across. Remember this last one here, that's going to be my darkest section. All right, and then going on to my last one that is going to be my darkest. So I'm really going in really super dark here. Basically as dark as my colored pencil will let me go. I'm going to go in and make sure it's all blended really nicely. I don't have any weird sections where it goes really abruptly from dark to light. And then I can also kind of take a step back, look at it from afar. Does it look like any areas need to have a little more darker? Do they look out of place? Does it look, like I said, that, you know, maybe you need to darken something up in that it doesn't go quite dark enough where you had it? And if that's the case, go in, add a little darker color in some of those areas to really give it that three-dimensional form. All right, do not lose these, guys. We still have one more step we're going to do with these next week. We are going to be cutting them out. So I would recommend making sure you have some scissors and glue. All right, have fun.